Greetings and welcome back to Digital Dating Over 50. And my name is Andrew, or in other words, Anonymous Andrew, to those who know me from the past 4 seasons. And today I have a special guest. Her name is Caroline Hood. And Caroline is a certified sex therapist, a licensed clinical social worker, an executive leader, and an author of the upcoming book, or the author, of Sex Begets Sex: Reclaiming Desire as an Act of Female Empowerment. And I just want to read her degrees because it's quite impressive. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from Columbia, a master's degree in social work from the University of Southern California, and executive certificate from Harvard University. What's that all about? What's an executive certificate?
It was about a 2-year program that I did while working full time that was based in the Harvard Kennedy School, which is their school of public policy or government, that I was doing to expand my leadership skills in running organizations and working in specifically in nonprofit and kind of public health spaces.
Gotcha, because I've never heard of that, and I didn't say welcome to the show, Caroline, so
Hi.
welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
alright. Um, so, we were just chit-chatting before we hit record, and I was telling Caroline that, uh, I took the show to the over 50, um, concept because I'm over 50, and I am having all sorts of issues in finding love and romance. And so I decided to dive into that for this season and maybe for the rest of the podcast. And I invited Caroline on because she has some interesting concepts about dating over 50 and romance. And one of them is that it gets better, not worse, because a lot of people, I shouldn't say everybody, but many people think once you hit that certain that the double nickels or the golden years, it's like sex and romance and love and dating is downhill and it just is bad. And that's just not true. Correct, Caroline?
Yeah, it's not true. I think it's a fallacy that we fall into because there's just this really, I think, kind of tired trope that it's just going to get worse and that's just about expectation. So no, it doesn't have to get worse and it really I think can get better in a lot of ways.
It can. And we're gonna talk about your book in a few minutes, but I can say that since I turned 50, which was a while ago, so um I have noticed that my relationships, while they may not have been sustainable or they were, I may have, they were short, some of them,
Mhm,
but
mhm,
I noticed that I was more mature. I was more, uh, I treated them better, and them
mhm,
being the female.
mhm,
Uh, uh, I probably should have mentioned this earlier. I'm an alcoholic in recovery, so and my audience does know that. And for the new people who don't know that, I am. I do have 11 years, so that could just tell you that when I say I treat them better, I mean when you're dating and you're married or romantically involved with somebody, but you have a substance abuse,
mhm.
it really doesn't. The two don't go together, right? Um, so I'm always talking about when I say treat them better, I was sober. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
but
well, I think it gets you to a place where you're probably treating yourself better, right? So then you're capable of treating someone else better. That's so huge.
yeah, and I look back at over the I had technically one marriage, and then I had a long term partner, which produced my third son. And while I was actively drinking, I did not treat them horrible. I was not that kind of a drunk, but when I did start to get sober and have been sober for a while, I've noticed, like you said, I take care of myself better, and I also my partner is more important to me. Back
Mm,
then, alcohol was more important to
mm,
me, or my next drink, or it was, and substance abuse and alcoholics typically are uh, all about me, 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 and of course, if you choose to get sober in the 12-step program, they work on that. They try to get you to not see that. So what that we're not talking about me. Let's talk about your book. Sex begets sex.
Yeah.
That's an interesting title.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, I've had some interesting conversations with folks who have that springs to mind different connotations. For me, the root of that came from the early just awfulness of early parenting, when your children are very young and they're not sleeping, and there is this adage of sleep begets sleep. You know, you actually want your infant to go to bed earlier, you want to nap more, to get them to sleep more, which I think some parents are often going, okay, well, my kid isn't sleeping through the night, so we'll just keep them up later, and then we'll get a better chunk. And actually, you want to put them to bed earlier, and they get more sleep. Um, but I was having a chat with someone who said, "Oh, it brought up to mind this biblical, if you read the Old Testament, such and such begets such and such, and there's this whole piece in various books in the Old Testament." Really, it's just that there is, and you might know this from Alcoholics Anonymous, this sort of action begets motivation to an extent, or the behavior change leads to the desire or the cognitive piece, as opposed to, if I think it, then I will choose to behave it. AA sort of flips that, right? You sort of say, okay, if I behave this way, then that will beget the motivation, the cognitive thinking. And I think with sex, and particularly as we age and have all the responsibilities of adulthood or parenting or all the number of things or caring for aging parents, the more you do it, the more you enjoy it, the more you want it, the better at it you get, the better partner you become. There is this sort of skill component and practice component where the more mastery you have at it, the more you're like, oh, this is really fun. I want to do it more. Um, but if you're only having sex once a quarter or every few months, it's it's too infrequent for you to really build up any of that ability to stay loose, to stay free, to not be in your head and go, "Oh my god, am I doing it right? Do I look okay?" Da, 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 da." So you need to have more for it to be really fulfilling, in whatever relationship you're in.
I agree with that, and especially the part where you touched upon AA.
Mhm,
But while you were saying that, something jumped into my mind about something that I think a lot of people, when they turn 50 or in their 50s and 60s, whether they're already married in long-term marriage, like so,
mhm,
30 something years, let's say, or whether they're dating and they're going to maybe have sex for the first time, whatever.
mhm.
Um, I know this because I am older. Our bodies start to not look the same as they
Sure.
did 25 years ago. And in my mind, I can say this because of my last relationship. When I was in the bedroom, the mojo in my head was the same. I was just as a great of a lover that I was then, and very giving. Uh, but was something interesting that I found with the ex-girlfriend, that she always wanted the lights off or dim.
Mm,
And
okay.
I've heard that in some, that means that they I don't want you to see me because
Mm,
I'm ashamed of my body. And
yeah.
if you're over 50, I get it, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
You could be in shape, you can go to the gym, but there's gonna be the cellulite, there's gonna be the uh, depending on male or female, there's gonna be wrinkles, there's gonna be, well, we don't have to name them all, but gray hair,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
all gonna be
Right.
there. What do we do about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, part of my book, I mean, when I was writing this, I was really, as a woman, sort of you write what you know, right? And speaking from my experience, but also speaking to, I think probably a more predominantly female audience, but couples really, is that body image and aging bodies and changing bodies it's so intimately connected with people's sex lives, as you just shared, these And I think there is a big piece, particularly for women, that they're just we are so socialized and so ingrained to be so self-conscious about our body, to think thinner is better, smaller is better, bigger boobs are better, and therefore the opposite is bad, that wrinkles are bad, that sagging is bad, that more meat on your bones is bad. And I go into some detail about really trying to deconstruct where we got that. Um, because it's really coming from a very shame it's really linked to sort of women feeling shamed for being sexual agents and for being physical agents. And I think also sort of being taught over time that our bodies are only sort of that's our resume, right? That's our calling card. And so if our bodies aren't whatever the picture of perfection is at that given day or decade or whatever is in vogue, then we're not good enough, and inevitably we're not sexy. And I think, part of the book is a call to action for women to say, to hell with that. Um, to be confident, to be proud of aging and wrinkles and folds, and that most people really love a real body, not a plastic body or a body that feels like, a toothpick or something, that there's something so sexy about the curves you have after you've had babies, the curves you've had after you've lived decades of memories and life and enjoyed your time. But I think that can be really hard for any gender, but I think particularly for women when it's just we're taught that that's not okay. I mean, from all the implicit and often explicit messaging, right?
Look at Instagram, look at
Yeah.
TikTok. Yeah, well, I don't maybe even Facebook. I You just scroll and it depends on your feed and what you're into, and but as a guy and a podcast, because so my Instagram is a podcast Instagram, and
Mhm.
I will sometimes uh what do you call it, follow certain women depending on what their reel was doing, but if I thought they could be a good guest or something. But
Mhm.
next thing I know, of course, you know how the algorithm works. Next
Yeah.
thing I know, I'm seeing OnlyFans models like show
Yeah.
up all, and I'm like, wait,
Right.
whoa, 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 this is not what I want. I mean,
Mhm.
it's nice to look at, but this isn't. So it but to your point is that's I think where society sees these beautiful uh, women, and what's interesting is I started seeing some women later in life, like not the term MILF, but
Sure.
moms that while the kids are at school and dad's at work, she's in the bedroom on OnlyFans
Mm.
doing at
Mhm.
40
Mhm.
and making money.
Mhm.
So which I think is I that's another issue, what I think about that, but I think it's good for her if her self-image is that she can do that. But anyway, we got off topic a little bit there.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's okay. I mean, I think there is this, I think what I see is this burgeoning, really exciting component of women who are sort of post 40, perimenopause, menopause, um, that are sort of unleashing some of those trappings that they were once taught and just kinda going, I'm just it's too much. It's too much baggage to carry around, and I'm just gonna be me, and I'm gonna be free, and I'm gonna embrace who I am potentially for the first time ever, and get to learn myself, my body, my
Mhm.
wants, my needs. And for many women, I think it's really exciting, and it's this time to really embrace sexuality, whereas, again, I think we're taught, "Oh, that's, like, the best part of our sex lives are in our 20s when we're single and we're out at the bars and we're doing whatever, and it feels so spontaneous." And I think that there is this, like, no, 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 no. Look forward to those older years when you are less constrained by worrying about what people think, hopefully, that you're more empowered, you're more confident, and you're more interested in saying, "Yeah, let's try this. Let's experiment. What's the worst thing that can happen? Um let's see what's possible." And that what is possible is that can be really empowering and very pleasurable. It can lead to the fun and to bring back what sex inherently is just it's play. It's just it's fun. But sometimes, we overload it with just like all of this stress and pressure. But at the end of the day, it's just this very mammalian animalistic instinct to have fun.
I want to talk about that for a second. Uh, but first, another thing popped into my head when you were talking about age. Uh,
Mhm.
like at 40, you said something. When I was growing up, and I'm going to say in my teens, and you would hear this either in sex ed or you would hear it. I don't remember because it was a long time ago, but I would hear women are at their prime, and I'm talking sexually,
Uh-huh.
at around 30, 35, and that the
Yeah.
men were in their prime between 18 and 22. And I think
Mhm.
what they were referring to was the men were their stamina was better at 18 and 22 and more fertile and more, but they are extremely inexperienced at that age.
Yeah.
The
Yes.
women at 35 are uh, much more experienced, and uh, I just never understood that comparison. And now as an older male,
Yeah.
I disagree with that at all.
Mm.
While maybe I don't have the stamina of an 18 or 22-year-old, I have the knowledge and the
Yeah.
experience of and I you could see why, and I don't necessarily condone this. I'm just, and we're going to go into the age gap thing here for a minute. But I heard a podcast on the way home tonight. I listen, of course,
Mhm.
in the
Yeah.
car, and there was somebody talking about age gaps, about younger women going for older men, and because they have the experience and they know that it's a no nonsense, and this thing about younger men or first of all, I think there's a problem with pornography. There's too many young men just watching porn, and they just don't know how to be with a woman. I've seen it
Mhm.
on Reddit. I've seen it.
Mhm.
I've taken calls and commercials, not commercials. I've just seen it that men in their young age are looking at too much porn, and then when they get with a woman, they have no idea. They don't have an erection. Anyway, I think that the over 50 crowd is much more experienced, much more mature, much more ready in the bedroom, and I like the idea that when you said something about the woman who just said, "Forget it, I'm just gonna." Now, when you said that, were you talking about women who are married or women who were just maybe they just got divorced and they're gonna go out and have fun?
Well, I think it's both. I don't think it depends on your relationship status. I think women are experiencing this moment where they're sort of unshackled by really young children. They're hitting this kind of midlife
Right.
zone and coming into their own. I think I do want to it's interesting, you bring up the age that men have more stamina in what you learned when you were young and I want to point out, I think some of those tropes that, men are at their peak in their teens and women a little bit later, particularly for men, um, that idea I think is really embedded upon a notion that sex equals penetration. And I think that is where a lot of people get
Yes.
it wrong. They have this base, this, first base, second base, home base. And the goal of sex is penetration and the goal is really climax for the man. And if that's your really narrow to myopic definition of sex and you're looking at it from purely like a physical standpoint, then sure, that's probably right that men would be at their peak at 18, let's call it.
And that's my point, is that
Yeah.
that's all they think of is just, "Let me stick it in and
Yeah.
ejaculate, and that's it." And
Right.
they don't know that there's so much more to it than that, and
Yes. And
we
it's
get
not yeah, it's it's a really sad definition of sex. It leaves a lot of couples and a lot of women particularly really unsatisfied.
Mhm.
It's only like less than 20% of women typically have orgasm from penetrative sex. I mean, it's not so okay, there's medication, there's all sorts of stuff, but also just if you decenter that as this home base expectation, it opens up so much opportunity to have a ton of fun. And as you said, I think hopefully as you age, you get to understand that you become a better lover, a better partner, and you recognize that there's a lot more to it.
There's a lot more to it, and I just there was a second thought I had is that when when I grew up, and I'll say my 20s, their sex was still kind of in the closet. Like you didn't
Mm. Mhm.
it I mean, while I even though the '80s and '90s were the cocaine years and the disco years, and there was a lot going on in Manhattan. Like you went to Manhattan and the Limelight and
Yeah.
Plato's Retreat and all that stuff. But the idea of the suburban housewife having sex was just you didn't think about they didn't talk
Yeah.
about that.
Right.
Nobody talked about that.
Yeah.
Today
Mhm.
they do. I
Mhm.
listened to a podcast, I'm not gonna mention it, but it's a wife who's married, and she talks about sex. Oh god, I wish I just don't wanna mention it. And
Mhm.
it's she's in her, like, late 30s or early 40s, and it's she talks about sex, and
Mhm.
you I don't think you would have gotten away with that 30 years ago. Although we didn't have podcasts 30 years ago, but
Sure. Well, yeah, and I think that that's again, I mean, you could go into sort of a whole cultural criticism. Oh, okay, is this religious based or is this? But
oh,
it's like
wow.
for women, you have sex in your 20s, let's call it. You have babies, and once you're a mom, no, like doors closed, throw away the key. You are an entirely different human being. Your identity has
You're
shifted
untouchable.
100%. Um, and how sad. I mean, how sad to think, okay, once you become a mother or parent, or once you cross over 40, or once you know, what name it, whether you're a male or a female, that this whole piece of your identity is gone. It's just it's not true. It's really not true, but I think socially that was very much what was expected. So whether people were having sex or not, you're right. Like they certainly weren't talking about it. And probably if it's not in the zeitgeist, if it's not being talked about, then often what people assume is that it is shameful. So my hunch is that, yeah, it was probably less sex because if you can't talk about it, it's out in the open. Well, it must not be a good thing. It must be shameful. And therefore, I'm a mom now. And so, no, that's just not part of who I am. And so that's just something in your relationship that's no longer a part of it.
And so the point that I was trying to get to was that that was
Hmm.
so long ago, and I think
Yeah.
the society we live in today has just blown up in a good way that it opened up the door because now I'll mention a few things, not anything that I personally agree with, but like today you have ethical non-monogamy or you have
Hmm.
polyamory,
Hmm.
and I think you're seeing a lot of that with I think
Yeah.
maybe more young couples, but there are some older couples in
Yeah.
their 50s going out to swing clubs
Yep.
and having fun, and you hear about it, you read about it, you see it, but again, you wouldn't have 30 years ago. So I think
Hmm.
the society has accepted it. I think sex is and talking about like we're on a podcast now
Yeah.
talking about it
Right.
openly.
Right.
And I did it just and you brought up religion. Oh my
Mm.
God. My other podcast with the
Yeah.
cults, you can't they have it all backwards in the cult and the religious world. They're still sticking
Yeah.
around like you can't have sex before marriage, and even then the guys and the husband is in charge, and like
Yeah. Right.
it's just all backwards. So
Yes.
that's a discussion for another day or
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
podcast.
Yes. As someone that grew up going to Catholic school for the
Oh,
first 12 years, I can we
me
can have
too.
that side conversation. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So uh, let's go back to your book for a second because I really I wish I had the opportunity to read it before you got on.
Sure.
Is it out yet?
It's not. No.
Not
So it's
okay.
forthcoming. But yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of, I think, going into the background of sort of where we came to be and how we have this idea that things will fade over time. And so part of what I do is I tackle some of these myths that it's no longer that spontaneity was critical, and that novelty in a new person is always the necessary ingredient for desire. And then go through how you can embrace your age, where you are, the logistics of your life, and really think about sex and sexual desire as an intentional practice, as opposed to this thing that just sort of happens around the margins, or if you have time, or if you're in the mood. And hopefully, cross your fingers that you're in the mood at the same time your partner's in the
Who's in the
mood.
mood.
Which is, I think, really problematic, and often ends in nobody aligns and you're never in the mood together. So there's all these things that I try to address these myths, and then work through the book by dispelling these myths and talking about how we can really support that sexual desire over a lifespan.
What's the biggest myth about desire?
Well, I think a big one that I just touched on is that it's spontaneous. And that particularly, again, I kind of go back to these ideas a lot of us had when we were young and single, and that whether we were dating or in a new relationship, that the sex we had at that point was pretty spontaneous. You go to a bar on a Friday night, you go with friends, you'd meet somebody, you'd go home with them, and then the next morning you were like, "Oh wow, that was so fun. What a spontaneous event." That was not spontaneous. You got dressed up, you showered, you prepped, you thought about what you ate, you got some drinks, everybody aligned at the same time. There was the music, there was the lighting, there was all of those things that created this curated ritual that said, Friday night, I'm going to have sex. Um,
You
and
had
when you
intent. They went out with intent. Yeah.
Yeah,
It
exactly, and
wasn't
even if you weren't really very overtly saying, "I'm gonna have sex tonight," you were putting together all of these rituals behind the scenes that was driving toward that goal. And what happens for so many people as they age and get into different phases of life is that they think that was just spontaneous. So it should just happen on a Saturday night when you've put 3 kids to bed and you're exhausted and you've worked all day and you've dealt with the doctor appointment and the insurance company and, the roofer's coming tomorrow. Like, absolutely not. So I think the myth is that it was ever spontaneous, and that if you have to put intention towards sex, then inevitably that uh that suggests that your desire or your chemistry with your partner is weaker. That if you ever have to put intention, that clearly must mean that it's like not as good and not organic. And I think that's a myth. Just because you put intention towards something doesn't mean that chemistry is any less than the chemistry you had when you hooked up with somebody at 2 a.m. going home on a Friday night.
in the back of a cab of a ta cas
Yeah.
taxi cab. Okay.
Mhm.
I you are great. Okay.
Oh.
Um, let's talk about that. You mentioned it actually twice,
Mm,
and I think it's a very big problem in marriages, whether the 30s or 50, like 50, the ages of 30 or 50, or you've been married for 30 years. So
mhm.
you just said on a Saturday she took the kids to soccer, and then she had an appointment in the afternoon with somebody, and then and blah 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 blah. And the husband may or may not be out playing golf. Let's just
Yeah,
pick something. He's out with his
sure.
boys on the boat or something. And that night he comes home and he's all hot because he was out in the sun all day, and he wants to get, wants to get his wife in bed, and she's like, "What? You're kidding me, right? Look what
Yeah.
I did all day." Right.
Right. Mhm.
This is where I have matured, and I have learned, and I have actually put this into practice, is and I think this is not a I'm not telling the audience something that everybody knows. Women cannot be they don't have an on and off switch.
Yeah.
So you're if the husband knows that that night, pick any, it doesn't have to be Saturday, it could be
Mhm.
Friday, whatever.
Sure.
You know that that night you want to, well, now this is going to throw spontaneity out the window, but you start in the morning. You get to work and you send her a very sweet text,
Mhm.
and you start the foreplay in the morning, and no matter what kind of day she's having, you make it better by just checking in with her and I love you and send you I've even heard this and I don't know if I subscribe to it, but send maybe a little uh, spicy picture of yourself, like your
Sure.
shirt off or
Sure.
something, some
Sure.
part of the body that she like,
Mhm.
whatever. And then when you get home that night, you take the babies and put on the bed, or maybe they're not babies at that point. I want to stick to the older couples.
Yeah, right.
Whatever that she needs a bath, draw a bath, give her a
Mhm.
glass of wine, whatever,
Mhm.
and then you'll find out at 9 o'clock when you crawl into bed, she might be more receptive to.
Yeah, I think, all of those are true. Like, it it's about prioritizing it in a way that I think I think you're right around the foreplay. Foreplay, some people define foreplay as like oral sex. Like, oral sex is sex, or foreplay is what happens on a Monday when you have sex on a Friday.
Correct.
So it is the constant day in and day out, flirting with your partner, the little touches, the thigh grabs, the kiss that just lingers a little bit longer, the dirty joke, the whatever it is that you have with the person you're dating, the text message, that all, making sure that you stay not just a partner or a coworker with whomever, but a lover, is
Mhm.
important. And it doesn't take more time, and it doesn't mean that you have to take a weekend away and all of these elaborate things. It's it's a wink, it's a grab, it's a joke. It's really easy. I think also, um for me, I am 43, so and I've been in a long-term relationship, and sex is something we prioritize, and it's not something we do at night, because it is
Oh,
something we prioritize. And
great
so
example. Yeah,
I am tired. I am tired at the end of the day because I have a really
you have a
full
job.
life. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've got all the things, a job and kids and all of it, and so, and I want to have sex with my partner, and so that's not something I wait till the very last thing of the day,
good point.
because it's not gonna happen.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter what day of the week it is. I remember, Jesus, bringing back memories. In the middle of the day, I would call the wife and say, "Hey, can you get away for half an hour?" And then, yeah, you'd meet somewhere, and I don't want to give too much away about who she was, but she worked at a certain place where that could happen, and
Mhm.
so you're right. It doesn't have to be night. I think too many people think it's like even if I that scenario I played out for you where I texted all day long and maybe even brought home something sweet for her. I don't know, box of chocolates or I'm
Sure.
just throwing stuff out there.
Mhm.
She, like you, could still be just like completely exhausted. And
Yeah.
I know that in my mind I would say to you, well, why don't you just get in the bed and relax and lay back and I'll do all the work.
Uh-huh.
You might your body might react to it, but your mind is going to be still elsewhere, right?
Sure, that's possible. I think, there's a couple things around that. So, Dr. Emily Nagotsky, did some really interesting research on female desire and has kind of coined these two desires around spontaneous desire and responsive desire. And she sort of says, okay, people are often one or the other. You can experience both, but spontaneous, it refers to people that, like, you think about something and you're horny all day and it just kind of comes and then you want to get with your partner or do whatever. Responsive desire, she really discusses as much more of the put yourself in a situation, draw the warm bath, get in bed, start kissing. Even if you're not like, oh, I really want to do this thing, you put yourself in a situation where then you go, oh, yeah, this is really fun. I think many women have much more of a responsive desire. And so there is this piece of, um, once you're in the situation, it will start to flow. And I think that's also linked to this frequency piece, because if you are somebody with responsive desire, and I'll use, people I've talked to, but myself as an example, I know that the more sex we have, the better I feel afterward, the more fun I
Yeah.
have. And so even if like I'm like, "Oh, it's busy, I'm tired, whatever is going on," I know enough to attribute that this is always gonna be positive, and I know enough to attribute that if I just put myself in this situation, it's gonna be fun, it's gonna be good for my partner and
Eh,
myself.
and
Yep.
pleasurable.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so there is that piece, it does go back to creating kind of that muscle memory or that wiring through some frequency to go, "Okay, even in those moments where, I'm not really feeling it from a spontaneous lens," you might be able to go, "Yeah, but I know that my responsive desire will kick in, and so I know that this is a priority for me in my life," and also know that that's not less than. A lot of people will sort of think, well, if I'm not just spontaneous about it, then it's not as good. And again, that I think is we're putting all these sort of value judgments around sex or our desire that don't help the situation.
Well, it's funny you said that because I was just thinking that there have been times, and I'll just cite personal examples where the girlfriend would come over. It was usually weekends because she lived a little farther away, and
Mhm.
weeknights were tough. And she would come over, and I could tell that something was off. Like she was
Yeah,
just, and I was like, right off the bat, I'd say, there goes the intimacy because the weekends were our time for intimacy. So it'd be
sure.
Saturday afternoons, like so, like you said, like it wasn't always evenings.
Mhm.
And there were times that she came over and she would say, "I know it's our weekend, and you're expecting intimacy or sex." And I would look at her and say, "I don't want you going into that bedroom thinking that you're going in there for me because I expect it, because
Yeah.
then I
An
feel
obligation.
yeah, I am not
Yeah.
gonna enjoy it. I'm
Yeah,
not gonna
right.
enjoy it.
Mhm.
I'm not
Yeah.
gonna get on under you, over you, behind you, between you, whatever, and
Mhm.
knowing that you're not enjoying this, or
Yeah.
you're doing it only for me. It just takes so I like that. If Even if I got her, and I got her to that point where you said all of us you should cross that line over, and she was feeling good about it.
Mhm.
But I don't wanna have to talk them into the bedroom, you
Yeah,
know?
which is great. I mean, I think, that that's a sign of somebody who sees that as a reciprocal relationship and derives pleasure from your partner
Mhm.
having pleasure as
Yeah.
opposed to just a selfish act. But I think, yeah, nobody likes the obligation, and I think that I hear that constantly is
Mhm.
these women that are like, okay, here, like, I guess I have to do this, like it's an oil change or doing the laundry or something. That it's just one more task that she is required to do in service of someone else. And so part of what I've really tried to lean into and reflect upon and research is, okay, so when did this become this thing that was only about somebody else? When did sex and my own, female sexual desire become about an other? And how do we bring it back to something that is mine, that I am a sexual agent and that I have this interest, and if I don't have this interest, I want to I want to like interrogate that. I want to reflect on that, and I want to think about, "Oh, how do I bring this back in my life? Was it always gone? Did I ever have this interest? How how come I don't have it? And how can I look at this as an integral part of my identity?" Again, integral as opposed to, okay, well, this thing is like, if it's there, but if it's not, fine, whatever.
Whatever, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think for so many women, sex has turned into this obligatory component and is turned into something that she's maybe not getting pleasure from. Like, who knows if she's actually having orgasms? Who knows if she's masturbating, if she's understanding her own body. I mean, there's so much exploration and communication
Yeah.
that often goes undone.
Okay, perfect segue. And I was gonna comment on a couple things you said, like, I think the reason that you talked about that, I think prior to the 1950s and 40s, that's what was required. The man went to work, the woman
Mhm,
was the
mhm,
homemaker, and when he came home at night, she was expected to make him happy because he was the breadwinner. I think that's kind of over the last 100 years. That's always. It wasn't until the 60s, 70s, and 80s where sexual freedom and the women's liberation and the burning
uh-huh,
of the bras and all that
mhm,
stuff happened.
mhm.
And I grew up during those times.
Yeah.
Uh, and then here we are in 2026, and all of a sudden, the women have sexual power, um, which is I would oh god, I could talk to you all night about this.
Yeah,
Does
likewise.
does desire so during let's get back to aging for a little bit, but
Yeah.
you did bring it up. Does desire really fade? And why do people believe it that it does?
Yeah, so I do not no, I do not think desire fades, and I think there is can be a little bit of a distinction between desire and libido. When I think of libido, that is like the physical hormonal component. Your body does age, hormones are different, they change, lubrication is different for men, erections are different, those sorts of things. So you do you do want to attend to it just like you would if if you need some glasses, right? So how do you keep yourself at a high functioning level? And that's lubricant, that's toys, that's medication, that's any of those sorts of things. So I think people really embracing that not as like, oh god, that's weakness, but rather that it's a pair of glasses that you would use, or it's the insulin you would use if you had diabetes, just a very standard course of action. But I also think it is so it's so obvious to me in so many ways that desire doesn't fade. Look at you talked about porn. Look at porn consumption. It's like the leading industry of
Big
all
one of the
industries everywhere.
biggest growing industries, yeah.
Yep. Look at this huge growth of romantasy fiction that female fiction readership market is like the biggest market right now. There's all these stories about
50
dragons
Shades of
and
Grey.
fairies and everything that this female audience is just eating up. And my hypothesis is that this desire is absolutely there. And the only outlet people have for it is in this fantasy fiction land. And so I
Mm.
believe that it exists. It just doesn't have a home. It's been displaced. And so people are saying, okay, well, it's got to live in an affair or in porn or in my novel or in the back of my mind somewhere because clearly it just can't live in reality. And so what I'm suggesting is nope, desire is alive and well, but we haven't been talking about it, we haven't been prioritizing it, we haven't been intentional, all of it.
So the couples are not communicating. So
Yeah.
let's just take a couple that's married. They got married at 25. So 25, 35, 45, 50. Married 30 years. They're
Yeah.
55 years old. The kids are
Mhm.
at that point, they're out of college, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe they
Mhm.
have the empty nest syndrome and they
Mhm.
still love each other. So, because
Yeah.
there are a lot of couples that divorce when the kids go off to college. They just wait for
Uh-huh.
that. I
Yeah.
don't know what the stats are on that, but it happens.
Yeah.
But at 55, the woman or the either one might still have the desire,
Yeah.
but is afraid. So he's off maybe watching porn, and she's, like you said, maybe reading one of the novels, and she might be pleasuring herself to the
Sure.
novel.
Mhm.
What I think, and I think we're seeing it, although we don't see it because it's behind closed doors. I think couples, and if they're not, they should sit down and say, "Hey, how can we spice this up?" Because, "Hey, I saw you reading that novel and you look pretty flush," you know?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
tell me what
Yeah.
was going on there, and maybe we'll
Mhm.
role play it." Or,
Yeah.
you mentioned toys. So, toys used to be a no-no. You'd have to go when in my day, you'd have to go like 60 miles somewhere to the
Yeah. Outside of town.
middle of nowhere, and there was this little store, and it just said adult store or
Yeah.
adult
Right.
something or novelty store or whatever. And it was so. and then over the years, they started becoming more and more, and you would find one in each city, and then the city started cracking down on the zoning because it was too close
Mhm.
to a school or a church. So, but now they're everywhere. All you got to do, even Amazon sells them. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Mhm.
And I Walgreens, you can walk in and buy a vibrator.
Yeah.
It may not be the best, but it's there. So the, I think it so the 55-year-old couple can absolutely, if they just, you mentioned communication, I think they have
Mhm.
to sit down and talk and say, "What's turned you on?" Because in over the last 30 years, their sex was spontaneity or like, uh, missionary, and it was just quick and
Mhm.
get it done, and the kids are
Mhm.
coming and,
Right.
That
Yeah, I mean, the communication is critical, and vulnerability within that communication is important. I was thinking as you were talking, I was thinking about the adage, what is it? When's the best time to plant a tree, 25 years ago or today? Like, yeah, you should have been talking about sex all along, but if you haven't, great, you start today. And that, I think, for so many couples, it's really interesting because I hear this frequently too, is there's so much love, between people, but it's a love that has sort of morphed into more of an affection and a love because you've built a life together, not this desire, this sort of sexually driven love. And so you wanna bring that back, but it can be really scary to enter into those conversations if you haven't been having them
especially
because
after all
this
those years. Yeah.
yeah, and I think, you are more apt to share it with a friend because that friend can go, "Oh, wow, that's weird." And the stakes are lower when you're sharing it with a friend. The stakes are higher when you share it with this person you've built a life with. It's very scary. So I think couples they are trepidatious to bring up these conversations because they feel like the stakes are so high. But there is such a reward if you can begin in small, simple, but also regular ways. Don't bring up don't bring up sex and try to have a conversation right after you've had sort of a bad interaction or right before the
No,
moment. Bring
no.
it up bring it up over coffee on a Tuesday. Bring it up over lunch then again on
Outside the
Wednesday.
bedroom.
Often. Yeah.
Yeah,
Often and outside of the bedroom so that when you get to the bedroom, it's easy and it's low pressure.
not awkward, right.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, oh, I that's that was like, I covered that over the last couple of seasons. It was absolutely, if you wanna introduce something new or you wanna talk about your partner's sexual behavior or anything, you
Mhm.
you do it outside the bedroom, and you do it even outside the house. Maybe you go out for pancakes or something, whatever.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
wanna I just gotta keep an eye on the clock, but,
Mhm.
I'm fascinated. One of the things we kind of, I read it in your bio, but we didn't talk about it. So you're a
Mm.
certified sex therapist. So that means
Yeah.
you do you see couples
Yeah, so
or
I haven't done a lot of individual practice with couples. A lot of my work has been at sort of a higher organizational level. Um, Most of what I've spent my time doing in the conversation I have are often with individual parties, sort of going, okay, how do I approach this in my relationship? So it's one person coming forward and expressing usually a challenge or often one or two things. I'm not having enough sex and I don't need to bring it up, or or there's too much sex. I feel like it's too much of an obligation, back to that obligatory component. And how do I deal with this because I'm uncomfortable? Those are really common.
interesting. And you don't you think I'm just naive here that
Yeah.
the one party is you don't want to ever talk to the other party and get their perspective?
No, I wanna talk to anyone and everyone who will talk. I think that's the more conversations we're having about sex and intimacy in or out of a relationship, the better we all are. I think the problems exist because, this exists in shame, back to your sort of thinking around Alcoholics Anonymous, the addiction thrives in shame and thrives in darkness. And then when you bring it out, it becomes much more normalized. And I think with sex, the more communication we have, the more we can normalize it and go, okay, this is just this thing we're going to work out. But the more we keep it to ourselves, it can spiral into resentments, into shame, into which can then manifest into poor choices potentially that have really negative consequences potentially to your life and to sort of the circumstances that you've built.
Two quick scenarios. So I'm a wife and I come to you and I say, I caught my husband masturbating to porn last night
Mm.
and we
Mhm.
haven't had sex in months. And so so apparently he's still horny.
Mhm.
So she comes to you for that.
Yeah.
What would you advise her?
Yeah.
I
So I'd advise her. So, one, I would say, okay, so you saw this thing and it made you feel sad. Like it made you feel hurt. It made you feel like okay, clearly he has a desire. What's wrong with me? Why isn't he coming to talk to me? All of these feelings are going to kind of rush through. So, what I would advise her to do is to take a minute and then to go to him from a place of curiosity and a place of kind of the classic therapy I statements and say, I know, you were masturbating and we haven't had sex in a long time. And I miss this aspect of our relationship. And I miss being wanted. And I miss wanting you. And I saw you doing that. And I had some sadness, and it's not because you were masturbating necessarily or because of the porn, but because really I recognize it it made me miss you, and can we talk about that? And I would advise her to approach the conversation from that lens as opposed to,
Great.
"How dare you?"
Don't judge.
Da, da,
No,
da,
no,
da.
no, no, no.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Would you at all invite him into the conversation at some point? And but is this virtual or
Always.
are you doing it in do you have an
Mostly
office?
virtual, but some in person, and I think it's always I mean, the biggest component about these conversations is that there's safety in the communication, and so depending on the situation but for that, if the woman came to me, that I would advise her to begin that conversation, and then it would have to be a two-way street to say, "Okay, if you want to invite him into a conversation to have a facilitated conversation, absolutely, I'm happy to do that, but he also has to be a willing party to that."
Participant, yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh, yeah.
And so the opposite. So the husband comes to you and says, I don't know. I haven't had sex with my wife in 3 months
Mhm,
but I'm trying and
mm,
I draw baths for her and I buy her candy and I buy her flowers and I take her to her favorite movies, whatever.
mhm, yeah,
And she's just not interested. Uh, and maybe it's something hormonal. Maybe she's going through menopause. Because that's something we didn't talk about
mhm,
uh,
yeah.
God, this topic could go on for
Yeah, there's a lot of tentacles, yeah, mhm.
and I don't wanna put you on the spot, but just how would you advise him?
Yeah, so if he's saying, "Hey, we're not having sex, but I'm really trying and I'm getting frustrated because she's not responding to my advances." Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot there, and I think I would go back to, okay, so it sounds like you've tried the bath and you've tried these behaviors. I would say, okay, have you have you asked her what what does she want? How is she
Mm,
feeling? What is her desire? Again, and similar to the last question, I would say, come to her and say, "Babe, I love you so much. I think you are so sexy. I think that I miss this part of our life and I've noticed that you haven't seemed as interested, but I love it and I don't want to place an obligation, but I want to talk to you about that because I think you are incredible. And whether we've been together for a month or 30 years, I am still hot for you and I want that part of our relationship to thrive." And I think she wants to feel wanted. Everybody wants to feel wanted. I mean, that's not a gender thing. That's great. You want to feel wanted. And so I think it's really important to communicate that.
I'm gonna break my own rule by time, but it's just fascinating. So, uh, the woman is, let's say, 57, and
Okay.
her mom had menopause at 59. So
Mhm.
she's what is it, premenopause or perimenopause? I don't know.
Perimenopause is the
Okay.
time before. Mhm.
Right. So she's starting to dry up. She's starting to
Yep.
feel non-sexy. She's starting blah blah,
Mhm.
maybe putting on some weight, whatever.
Sure.
She might want to feel desired, like the husband says all those nice things, but she might
Mhm.
just really feel unsexy. And I'm not going to take my clothes off in front of him because I don't look the way I did 10 years ago. So how do you
What
how
do
do
you
you
do?
navigate around that?
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, there's a lot of pieces there. I would say, one thing, um, there's now a long time, decades old, debunked study that really prevented women from going on hormone replacement therapy because the
I
study
heard, yeah.
suggested that it caused breast cancer. So that study has been overturned, but there's still some of that in the atmosphere. So one, I would recommend any woman go to her GP, her internist, her gynecologist, and discuss some of the feelings because perimenopause and menopause isn't just about your period and hormones. It also impacts weight, as you said, irritability, anxiety, some depression. So wide spanning symptoms. So I encourage all women to take their health into their own hands. The other piece too, sort of circling back to what we chatted about before, I think this is where it's really important to try to distinguish body image from sexual identity and try to retain, because there is this like, oh, I feel puffy, I feel fat, I have no sexual desire, and they go from A to B in no time. And what I encourage a lot of people to do is go, okay, yeah, so I might be feeling not my most physically beautiful self today, but that doesn't mean that I am not sexy. And that doesn't mean I'm not desirable. And that doesn't mean I don't deserve pleasure. So, all of that, there is this kind of cognitive place that I just really encourage women to go, just because you feel puffy or whatever today, that doesn't mean you don't deserve to be and feel and experience sex
Love
and sexual
and
pleasure.
pleasure. Yep.
Yeah. And I think also if you have a really attentive partner who can also help her see that too and point that out is really
If the
lovely.
husband or the partner learns about menopause,
Yeah.
he can recognize the so I'll give you a quick example. I did date somebody who was Perry, I guess,
Mhm.
because almost every night she'd wake up with hot flashes
Sure.
and
Yeah.
dripping wet,
Yeah.
we had to change the sheets one night, and
Yeah.
it was just sweat. It was
Yeah.
just her sweating, and I at first it was kinda like, what's going on here?" And
Uh-huh.
and I went out and I did some Googling, and it turned out that, what I got up with her and I helped her change the sheets, and then I
Mhm.
asked her, "What can I do to make you feel better?"
Yeah.
Blah, 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 and all of a sudden, she brought me into that world,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and and she looked at me and said, "Oh, he's not." Because women, I think, are gonna look at a guy and go, "He won't understand any of this." Guess
Right.
what? A lot of guys go through menopause too. We have our own version, and, I think there's a term for it, I forget. But, so I can, what's the word? I can, sympathize for what she's going through.
Yeah, and I think again that's a piece, the more we talk about it, the less shameful it is. And women, getting a period or getting a hot flash or going through menopause or
Part of life.
perimenopause, it's this thing that's sort of like, oh well, that's just happening behind the scenes, and don't say it. It's sex is a physical act. It's more than that, but it is also a physical act, and sort of to separate it and segregate it from the body, it's not fair. We are living in these bodies that have hormones that are fluctuating and all sorts of things, and for your partner to honor that, and to also for you to say, "Hey, this is happening right now. It's out of my control. I'm struggling with it. I'm trying to maintain this aspect of our life that's really important, this intimacy, this connection, while I'm enduring this physical challenge. It's challenging for me, but I want to figure out a path through it. And if you have a partner who can say, okay, great, I'm going to join you in this path, this things might look a little different because we might need different sheets, or we might need waterproof blankets, or we might need all of these things, or we might need medicine, but whatever, let's walk this walk together.
And the reverse is true real quickly, and is in later life, the male is gonna have erectile dysfunction, most
Yeah.
likely
Yeah.
depending on prostate and all sorts of
Uh-huh.
health, whether it's blood pressure or whatever. And I did listen to somebody once say the woman should do the same thing. Don't make fun of him, don't judge him, don't say, "Oh, because you
No.
can't get hard, you don't find me attractive." The woman needs to console him because he's embarrassed. He is shocked that, "Oh my god, it doesn't work." And so it's kinda like goes both ways because some point it's gonna happen
100%.
to him. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, it's physical. That's normal.
It's
It's
biologically part
normal.
of our we're born, what do they say? The minute we born, we start to die, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly, and we're
but
so lucky that we get to experience this
and what
trajectory.
happens in between is just natural life. So from when when the guy gets his first wet dream and the girl gets her first period, all the way, it's all part of the biology of the male and human and the female body. And I I think people forget that sometimes, you
Yes,
know. So um,
yes.
we do have to wrap up, and I have 2 pages of questions. So I I don't. Uh, Tell us where we can find you online, where the book will be when it's coming out, and anything else that maybe you skipped over or you would like to just finish up with some thoughts.
Yeah, sure. No, this has been a great chat, and happy to go off on all the different avenues. There's so many to talk about, and I'm just glad that there is more conversation about that. That's the goal. So the best place to find me is on my website. It's desireinreallife.com, Desire in Real Life, and also on Instagram at the same at Desire in Real Life. And the book, I don't yet have a publication date, so I'll be posting that on my website and all that once I know that, but hopefully soon. So crossing my fingers.
I ask all my guests this who have books. Will you, you might not know yet, but will you have an audio version of the book at some point?
I hope
You,
so.
yeah.
That would be great.
I cannot read a book. I cannot sit down long
Yeah.
enough to read a book because I'm more, I guess, a little bit of ADHD and some other things, but I just don't have time. But if it's on audio, I can listen to it in the car. I can listen
Yes.
to it while I'm playing sports or riding my bike.
It's more accessible.
It's so
Hmm.
much more accessible, and I can absorb it too because I can read a page 3 times and still not absorb what I just read. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
okay, Caroline, wow, what a fantastic,
Well,
interview, and you are I wish you the best, and I don't know. We might have to have you come back one day because look, I wanna show you. I have
yeah.
3 pages, and I literally just crossed off maybe 3 questions we got to because you're right, there's
Yeah.
just so much that we need to cover.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, just let me know. I'm happy to, like I
okay,
said, I think these conversations, the more we have, the
I agree.
better we all are. So
We gotta
happy
talk
to.
about it. So if it's
Mhm.
not talked about, it's being shoved under the carpet. So, all right,
Yes,
everybody,
exactly.
Caroline Hood and my sex therapist friend and new author, and I can't wait for the book to come out. So
There you go.
it was a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
All right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.